In the previous lesson, I presented how to create a new class, a data class, and we used class-level variables, a method called a constructor to create new instances, public properties that front end our private class-level variables, and methods to do things with the data. And in that video lesson, I just simply presented my code and how I organize things. However, there's a planning tool to help you put that together, and it's called a UML class diagram. UML stands for Unified Modeling Language. The UML class diagram is just a simple little grid with three sections. The first section is the name of the class. In this case, employee is the name of our class. Then we have the properties. Now, in a lot of languages, such as C#, we can have public properties that automatically have private class-level variables underlying them. And so you just create the properties, you don't have to create the class-level variables. In VB, though, we do both. So I modify my class diagram a little bit for VB in that I show the properties names, and then in parentheses, we see the class-level variables. Now, I want to point out one thing on the property names and the class-level variables. You'll see a plus sign for the property names. That means they are public, and a minus sign in front of the class-level variables. That means they are private. So those are two little characters that we use in UML diagrams to denote the private versus public entities. I also made a note here for full name that it's read only, and so it won't have a setter, it just has a getter. Then in the third bottom box of the UML diagram are our methods. And I included the constructor method here of new for Visual Basic. In other languages, it would be the name of the class rather than new. And then the methods that occur at the bottom. We saw the calc gross pay and the give raise percent and so forth. I don't always put the constructor in. It's just a given I'm going to create a constructor. But a lot of programmers do put that in for the methods. Now, one thing I will point out here, the way I construct things is usually properties, constructors, and class methods. But with the class-level variables, I put those at the top. Then I put the constructor and the public properties. Looking at the UML diagram, I'm realizing it probably makes more sense to do the class-level variables first as a section in Visual Basic, and then the public properties, and then the constructor method, and then the other class methods. And I kind of came to that conclusion looking at the crossed lines here going from the public property and the constructor crossing over that. I wouldn't have those crossed lines if I did that in a different order. Either way works, but you might want to consider that, and I'm probably going to consider that in the future for Visual Basic, doing class-level variables and then the public properties, constructors, and class methods. There are other UML diagrams, but we'll use the class diagrams, and in some cases we'll have multiple classes, and we can show the relationship between those classes in things such as class inheritance or class abstraction. We'll get to that next week. If you do Google search on UML class or UML diagrams, you're going to find a whole lot of information out there in Google or in YouTube. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the Programming Practicum playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos I create, you can click my picture in the top right to subscribe to the channel.